It's James here from goodguitarist.com, and in today's lesson I'm going to show you how to play Blackbird by the Beatles. Now this is one of the most famous fingerpickers out there, so the song itself requires no introduction. As far as what we're going to accomplish in today's lesson, we're going to go through it in terms of shapes and then picking patterns and put it together, as simple as we can go. If along the way you find you need any extra help, I have a few resources. There's my free ebook, which will help you with all the basics of chords and strumming. And for fingerstyle, I have my course, Fingerpicking Mastery, that goes from beginner to intermediate and a little bit of advanced. All the stuff you need to play songs just like this and all the other famous fingerpickers like Landslide, Dust in the Wind, stuff like that. Some newer stuff too. So please check that out if you need any extra help. There's also a chord chart available for this song on my Patreon if you need any help following along with the tune, or you need some written material to follow along with to help you out there. That's on my Patreon. I'll put links to all that stuff down below. Otherwise, we're going to get started with the intro, which goes like this. And normally when we're fingerpicking, our three fingers are going to be on the thinnest three strings, but in this case we're actually going to move it over. Just like we did on Country Roads by John Denver, we're going to put our index on the B string and our middle finger on the high E string, and our thumb is going to be going between one of the thicker strings and the G string. So with our first shape, which is just this, by the way, we just have to put our third finger on the third fret of the thickest string. That's our G chord. And we have our index on the B string with our picking hand. Our index is on the B string, and our thumb is on the thickest string. We pinch them together, and then our thumb plucks the G string. So let's just get used to that first motion. Do it a few times. Your thumb is alternating between the thickest string and the G string. And then from there, our next shape, we just have to put our first finger on the first fret of the B string. So the first two shapes are pretty straightforward. You just have one finger there, and then you move to that shape. And for picking, our thumb has to move to the A string. Otherwise, it's the same thing. So A string and B string together, thumb and index, and then my thumb plucks the G string. And putting that together with our first shape, so just try that little bit out. The picking's the same for both shapes, except our thumb is on the thickest string for the first shape and is on the A string for the second shape. And from there, we're gonna make this shape right here, which you'll find in a bunch of tunes, Dust in the Wind, Landslide, G over B. And we pick it just like the previous chord, just like that A minor chord. So thumb is on the A string, index is on the B string, together, and then thumb on the G string. So we can put all three of those shapes together now. Just try that. And if this shape is giving you trouble, just go between that and that silently. Just try it a whole bunch. Just going between A minor and G over B. And now we're gonna slide way up. And for this part, ideally you'd lift your hand a little bit and then place it down on the shape so that you're not going and making one of those big squeaks. I had to try really hard while I was demonstrating this a few minutes ago to avoid that squeak, because you're going way up the neck. And we land here with our index finger on the 10th fret of the A string and our pinky on the 12th fret of the B string. And here for the plucking, it goes like this. And we can break that down into our thumb and our index. Our thumb is just alternating between those two strings. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. Now our index is playing with our thumb on the very first stroke, just like we did for the other shapes. And now we alternate. Thumb, index, thumb, index, thumb. was going thumb, index, thumb, but our thumb was switching strings. That's tricky to get under your hands, but if you just go through it slowly, just going. And before we put that all together, let's work on it one hand at a time. And what I mean by that is, first we'll get our chord hand figured out. We'll go through the 4 shapes, starting off with our G, and we're just gonna pinch our shapes, you know, just thumb and index, just like that. We're not gonna worry too much about the picking. And then going to A minor, G over B, and then the high G. And we'll just play it like this. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we took the picking out of the equation, made it really simple, and just focused on the shapes. Now we'll do the reverse. We're just gonna go between the first 2 shapes because it makes our thumb switch root notes. So, and then we switch 2 times on this one. Let's try that, just going back and forth between those first 2 shapes. A couple times each. Just to get used to moving our thumb to follow the chord shapes. And then to get ready to move up to that high G, we should go and just do that a few times, you know, just we're just systematically going through every transition and working on it. You know, all the tough parts, like going from here all the way up here, you should definitely work on it. And once you've taken a moment with each of those 3 little exercises, we can put it together and play through our I guess we call this the start of the verse. 3 and 4 and. Time. So that's the first little bit of the tune. The next part goes like this. And this is probably the most complicated part of the song, but it repeats just a couple frets higher. I'll show you what I mean. We're starting off with this shape right here, which is just like our high G, except at the 3rd fret. And this is a C shape, or it's the outline of a C shape. So I have my first finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, and my pinky finger or my ring finger, depending on what's comfortable for you, on the 5th fret of the B string. And if you've taken my course Fingerpicking Mastery, you'll recognize this as the 10th. That's the interval, because we're 10 notes from here to here. Super useful. It's in like a bajillion songs, including this one. We're gonna play our usual pattern. And then I'm gonna put my middle finger 1 fret higher than my index. So it's on the 4th fret of the A string. And my index is gonna go to the 3rd fret of the thinnest string. And since we're on the high string, I'm gonna actually put my middle finger on that string to pluck it. My thumb's doing the same thing. So we go from this shape with our index plucking the B string to this shape right here, C sharp diminished, and our middle finger. And then that exact same thing repeats, but 2 frets higher. So my index is on the 5th fret, my pinky's on the 7th fret. It's the same thing as before. I just brought it up 2 frets. And then I'm gonna switch to a shape that's also 2 frets higher. So it's the exact same thing, but 2 frets higher. So let's just work on it in one position. Let's work on it right here for C, over and over again. And you could pluck this all with your index if you want. If you're fine with that, I have no problem with it. That works too, or middle finger. Feels a bit more comfortable to me, but that's just me. So we did it a whole bunch of times in one position. Now let's try to do both of them, going. You know, so just doing the same thing, but 2 frets higher, all in a row. Let's try that. 3 and 4 and. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And once we get to this point, we're going to go. So for that one, I have my first finger on the 7th fret of the A string and my ring finger on the 8th fret of the B string. And this is almost the same shape, except it's condensed, 7 and 8 instead of 7 and 9. And we do this pattern, the faster one. So we do the pattern one time on this shape, and then we lower our index finger to the 6th fret and we do the same pattern. So that part's not too bad. Let's just try it a couple times. One, 2, 3, 4. So work on all of those little bits separately, and then when you're ready, we'll put those together, starting off on that C chord, 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Cool, so we're about halfway through the verse now. The next part we're going to learn goes like this. So we're using the same shapes now. At this point, I think we've gone over all the shapes that we'll be using. So we have our major 10th shape on D on the 5th fret. So 5 and then 7 on the B string. And then we go to C sharp diminished. So instead of playing them ascending, we're going below. And then we go into C. And we're using our faster pattern. And then C minor. So see, for that we went from the major 10th shape to the minor one. So let's try that, going D. Just try that a couple times. And then when you're ready, we can add the rest of it. And we're almost through with the verse. The next bit goes like this. And that's all using the faster pattern and shapes that we've pretty much all covered. So we were just on the C minor. We just drag it down 1 fret. Then this shape, so my middle finger on the 2nd fret of the B string, same picking. And now I'm going to go down to the 1st fret of that same string, and our picking changes. My thumb is going to be on the D string now. Otherwise it's the same, so just alternating between these 2 strings instead of other strings. And then for G, for our first shape. Like that. So the picking is the same for the first two shapes. Then our thumb has to change to the D string, and then the thickest string. And we'll try that part together. 3 and 4 and. Three and 4 and. And before we move on and learn the rest of this, I think it's a really good time to review what we've learned so far. And I want to do it just the shapes and then with the picking pattern. So we're going to go through everything we did so far, just the shapes. We're just going to be pinching the shapes, and this will help you place your thumb on the correct root for each chord shape as well. So we're going to go through this nice and slow. 3 and 4 and. So make sure you can do that, just plucking each chord once, not worrying about the pattern, but focusing on getting all those shapes in order. And when you can do that, we'll add the picking to it nice and slow. 3 and 4 and. Cool, so that's the first verse, and from here we would play another verse, and they're connected by a little piece that we'll call the transition. It goes like this. And there's nothing new there. That's just like the end of the verse, except without the C minor shape. So it's just like this part from before, except we took out that shape. And we're going to be picking on those two chords with our slower pattern. And then once we hit the A7, that's when we kick it into next gear. So just take a minute. I'm going to play through it. You can always just watch, see what's going on, and then try it with me after. 3 and 4 and. Now we'll be incorporating that part into a play along near the end of this lesson. We'll have a much longer play along, and we'll put that part to use. But for now, let's just move on and take a look at the chorus, which goes like this. So you might realize at this point we've learned all the components. Now we're just kind of stringing them together in a bit of a different way. We're going to start off with our first finger on the 8th fret of the A string, and then our pinky or our ring finger on the 10th fret of the B string, making our major 10th shape. And this one's at F because my first finger is on F. And before we go through this shape by shape, let's actually focus on the root notes. This part uses a descending bass line. So I was playing the whole chord shape, but I was only plucking the bass note, and you can see it's a descending bass line. It's used a lot. Like that sounds like These Days by Jackson Browne, I've been out walking. It's obviously not exactly it, but it has that same vibe. Anyways, all we have to think here is where our root note is, and then whether or not our finger is making the major shape, meaning there's one fret of space between our fingers, or if it's making the minor shape, where there is no fret of space between our fingers. And our root notes go 8, 7, 5, 3, 1. So 8, and then it's just odd numbers. 7, 5, 3, 1. So just play that bass line a couple times. 8, 7, 5, 3, 1. And then when we're adding our shapes, major, minor, minor, major, major. We'll go through that a bit slower. So major, that's F. Then at the 7th fret, it's minor. 5th fret is minor. 3rd fret, major. And then the 1st fret, major. And once we reach the 1st fret, we go back up to the 3rd fret. And let's just try that bit of the progression. Again, 8, 7, 5, 3, 1, 1, 3. Again. And now with the picking, we're going to do our simpler pattern on the first 4 shapes. And then once we reach the 1st fret, faster pattern on both of those. So simple, 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 fast. So let's try that together nice and slow. 3 and 4 and. Again. And once you're used to that, we do it once. Then we repeat it to this point. And then instead of going back up to the 3rd fret, we're going to drop down to our A7 chord, which is just one finger on the 2nd fret of the B string. We've already played this. And then D, and then G. Just like the end of the verse. So we've already done that little bit. Let's add it to this. So we're going to play. Just take a second. I'm going to play through it super duper slowly. You can always just watch me do it and then try it with me after. 3 and 4 and. And at this point, we have put our fingers through every configuration that they're going to be going through when playing this tune. To learn the last few bits, all we have to do is just take what we already know and change up the order a little bit. The next part I want to take a look at is the interlude, and it goes like this. So that happens like halfway through the tune, and it's not essential that you learn it, but you know, I'm going to teach you the whole song, and you might recognize every single part of that. You know, we're just taking what we already know and just doing it a little bit differently. We're starting off just like we start the verse. And then we're going to stay on this, do it a couple more times. And then we're just going to do our simple pattern 3 times, 2, 3, and then we're just going to pinch it 2 times. And the time is slowing down at this point, so you really have to listen to the recording a whole bunch of times to get the same feel. You know, I could demonstrate my interpretation of it, but you're better off going to the source to really hear how to do this part. Anyways, once we do that, we pause a sec, slide back down, and then we play this. And we're just going through some shapes, just like the beginning of the tune. And here we're going to go to this one, and then back to G over B, then A7, and then we do our fast pattern on D7. So once again, G, A minor, G over B, C, G over B, A7, and then D with the fast pattern. And then from there, we would go back into the verse. We would play that transition thing a couple times, and then the tune is over. So we'll play the interlude nice and slow now. 3 and 4 and... slide down. And now all that's left to do is assemble the tune, and I'm going to play through the whole thing start to finish nice and slow. It's going to take a while, and we're going to pause at certain sections, and I'll talk about what's coming next, just so you have an idea of how to cut through the entire song. 3 and 4 and... Then we start the verse, same way. Diminished stuff. Transition. Back to the verse. Straight into the chorus. Another verse. This one's instrumental. Straight into the chorus. off this G here, straight into the interlude. Verse. All right, so that's how you play Blackbird by the Beatles. And remember, if you need any extra help, I have my course, Fingerpicking Mastery, that will help you build up all the skills necessary to play a song like this, to play a bunch of other classic fingerpickers. I also have my free ebook, my complete beginners course, and the chord chart for this available on my Patreon. And remember, as you're working on this, to take some time just doing the shapes, you know, getting comfortable with that section by section, adding the picking section by section, and then gluing it together in small chunks and then bigger and bigger chunks. You know, this is the type of song where it's really worth your while to go through it nice and slow. Just the way that we did it in this tutorial is how I would learn the song. You know, that's the way that I've taught my students how to do it. We work on each bit. So just go through this tutorial in order a few times if you need to, and don't forget about that chord chart. If you need any extra help, please ask in the comments down below or send me an email. Otherwise, have a fun time practicing, and I'll see you soon.